All right, Pnoid, we live.
What's going on, man? It's Tom Pease with Pnoid News. You know how this motherfucking situation works. It's a goddamn Monday stream. You know what I'm saying? I know Golf City's still running, but you know the deal. They always run motherfucking long. And hey, look, man, I got shit to do tonight, so I ain't got time to be waiting around on motherfuckers. It is what it is. What's going on? With me, as always, is my bottom bitch motherfucker. Accelerate, crashing on his couch because you know we caught that hate speech strike from making fun of mariachi bands. So without further ado, let's let him motherfucking take it over for a second. What up, man?
Dude, this is news to me. We're streaming on Mondays now. I thought it was Tuesdays. We're doing Mondays and Tuesdays.
We're doing whatever the fuck it is.
We're gonna do 7 nights a week. Is that how we're gonna roll?
Man, look here. You understand I streamed for 6 hours yesterday on my motherfucking new channel?
Yeah, and you did
another goddamn bubble.
You did another fucking 6 hours this afternoon.
Man, look, we got caught up talking about people who put stuff inside of their butts. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, like I said, I heard it from work. I didn't really watch. Probably good thing I didn't. I'm gonna guess there was a lot of not safe for work pictures being flashed on the screen.
Sometimes, you know what I mean? It is what it is. Wait, today is Monday. Yeah, fucking SINRISE. It's fucking Monday. Get your goddamn head out of the fucking gutter. Still sleeping on the weekend and shit. He's like, fuck, man, I missed work all fucking day today. Shit, man. So what's going on with you today, Celebrate, man? How was work?
I mean, I didn't do jack shit all day. I'll watch YouTube. I mean, I guess you can call that a win, but Jesus Christ, did today go slow. I was only at work for like 6.5 hours. It felt like it was 12. Man, I did get some time to go outside and play with my new drone. Got it stuck in a tree. Had to grab a fucking broomstick to pull it out. It was a lot of fun. All the kids in the neighborhood were like staring at my ass funny. It's like, what the fuck is he doing playing with a toy?
You know, fucking where a kid can be a kid again. You know what I'm saying? He went over to
Toys right? Yeah, dude, I just recommend to anybody watching, if there's a Toys R Us nearby, go check it out. Everything's like 50 to 60% off.
I feel like they closing that motherfucker down, man. They closing that motherfucker down. Actually, I did a piece on my other fucking channel about Toys R Us closing shit the fuck down.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't think it's shitty. You'd think there'd be plenty of room for brick and mortar stores like that, but there's just not. I mean, the only ones that are really successful are the more novelty type toy stores. You can't necessarily find the same toys at Walmart or on Amazon. I mean, we got one of those on the plaza in Kansas City. Pretty nice area. It's a pretty cool shop too. They got some cool shit that.
Well, I'll tell you what, the only one I've seen growing and fucking expanding really, and I mean as far as brick and mortar period is concerned, is Bass Pro Shop. You know what I mean, as far as the whole retail market.
That's true. It's true. One opened up here not too long ago.
Yeah. Well, you know.
Yeah, I think the original one was from Springfield, Missouri.
Yeah, fucking. They're selling boats and hunting equipment and shit. You know what I mean? You really can't buy the stuff that they sell at Walmart or fucking Amazon. You know what I mean? Because you can't ship bullets, and honestly, it costs way too much to ship fucking boats any fucking way.
Yeah, I mean that's true. If you're selling guns and shit, and then boats, I mean it's just the same as going to a car dealership, except for boats.
Well,
one of the reasons you go to Bass Pro.
Yo, man, fucking, you have no idea how expensive fucking boats are. Like, they are goddamn it fucking expensive.
That's a pretty fucking good idea. Whenever I was in high school and junior high, my mom was dating a guy that he actually owned a couple boats that they had docked down at the lake. So,
man, listen, you know, I mean, like, look, I'm talking even like smaller fucking shit. Like, I got a bullshit ass.
You can spend like $40,000 on like a little fucking pizza.
Now I'm gonna tell you like this. Boat. Yeah, I had a fucking boat. It was a 2-person boat, right? They wanted $4,000 for a 9-horsepower fucking motor.
Jesus Christ! Talking about the ones that are actually like, I don't know. I don't know anything about boats where the engine's kind of built in underneath.
Well, you know, fucking
I had water jets and everything.
I build boat motors and shit. You know, I mean, it's one of my hobbies I like fucking doing. You know, like I build like boat motors out of lawnmowers and shit. You get an old boat leg and you weld up the fucking plate to the bottom of the fucking lawnmower and attach the fucking clutch to it and shit and put, you know what I mean, put it on top of fucking old like Esca boat leg or some shit. You know what I mean? And fucking, Go ahead.
Well, it seems like that'd be really good if you're just trying to make like a fishing boat or some shit. But if you want something to just chill on the lake for hours and hours, I don't know. Me personally, I'd want something a little bit more fancy, which means I'm not going to be buying a boat anytime soon.
Yeah, I feel.
Yeah, I still haven't even paid off this goddamn computer. Spent all my money on Operation Fright Craig.
Yeah, man, we're spending a lot of money on Operation Fright Creek.
Dude, I don't even want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. Fortunately, Kasu, Sock, and Jack T, they came through pretty big. Actually put that money back into Operation Fright Krieg. On June 14th, Dave Rubin has his Patreon stream where he answers Patreon chats. So I'm going to get fucking...
Hang on. Oh, God damn it. Turd Flinging Monkey was in the waiting room for a second.
Oh, you missed him. I don't know, man. Send him a message. Have him on. He's probably got more to talk about than I do. I can talk about fucking AP talking shit like he wasn't even dominant. Go back and watch the stream, anybody. If you want to see all the matches of me versus AP, I whooped his ass the first few rounds, and then after that I bounced out for a little bit. Then we had a couple close matches after he already took, I don't know, 20 fucking wins off of Malcolm from the North and Churchy McBiscuit. I want a goddamn fucking rematch. My name's gonna be Fight Me Ho until he agrees to it. I like how he changed his name to Dick Puncher too. He was catching all the ultra combo finishes like in very clutch situations. I commend him for, but still.
Yeah, man. I'll be honest with you, man.
Yeah, I know you don't know shit about Street Fighter.
Yeah, I know about the old shit. I used to play it at the fucking arcade. You know what I mean? Like, I had a handheld version for a while. You know what I mean?
I mean, we were playing the old shit. That was the whole point.
Gotcha.
I know Geek Thulu came in and made fun of me because I was trying to play Guile and not fucking very good at Guile. I'm not
good at message me.
Yo, what's going on, man?
Hey, okay, so I have a very specific problem, and I'm just kind of bouncing around and seeing if I could find someone to help me with it.
What you got going on?
All right, so I guess Sargon Avocado did a live stream the other day on his live streaming channel, not his main channel, and someone brought my name up to him in a super chat to debate about egalitarianism.
All right.
And like he's like, oh yeah, have him email me. I don't know this motherfucker's email. So so I was just gonna like kind of do a video where I present my argument against egalitarianism, but I'm trying to find someone who, obviously not like a YouTuber or anybody, but someone who kind of shares his like kind of center left moderate egalitarian beliefs. That way when I present my argument, I can hear their questions and counter arguments and respond to those.
So what you want me to get like Gasly to, you know what I mean, fucking like respond to you or something?
Well, no, I don't. No, they don't have to be a YouTuber. I just wanted
you just need someone with center left beliefs.
Yeah,
right?
someone who's got someone who would consider themselves kind of like in that kind of center left moderate egalitarian, group that has similar beliefs to Sargon, so that when I present an argument, I can hear their response and their questions. I don't think I'll ever talk to him because I'm nobody's, but
oh man,
I don't know.
That. Yo, the hell with that, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, yo, don't get anything misunderstood. You ain't nobody.
Well, no, what I mean is, as far as I'm not talking about like existentially. I'm talking on YouTube, like channels with hundreds of thousands of subs and shit like that. They're not going to talk to me. I mean, I appreciate it. People like get throwing my name out, but. You're wasting your money. They're not. They have nothing to gain by talking to me, so they're not going to. And I don't care. I have little to gain by talking to them. But because people are throwing money at him, I'm like, oh, I might as well make a video presenting my argument against egalitarianism. But I don't want to just monologue. I want to have someone who can push back a bit and ask questions and present counter arguments so I can elaborate. So I'm just bouncing around trying to find someone in that.
I already know the kind of things Sargon's going to say, right? Like he's going to go into the John Stuart Mill's philosophy about social contract, and while maybe government doesn't need to do these things, but it's convenient. I don't mind paying my tax dollars, which really sidesteps the moral argument of the whole thing.
Right. So that's the thing well, here I'll want me to test my argument against you. see what you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't
Like-
support that. I'm a pretty right-leaning
Yeah,
libertarian
yeah,
individual, but go for
Well,
it.
damn it! All right, so
that's your argument right now. You know what I mean? We'll see. Like, you know what I mean? What
Okay.
what against it.
all right. So here's my basic argument: is I start out asking someone who considers themselves center left, moderate, why don't you support communism? And what would he probably see something to the effect of it doesn't work, millions of people die, it causes starvation, it's not efficient, all these things like that. I'm like, well, that's an argument for practicality. Morally, communism is all about equality. And wouldn't you agree that communism, supporting the basic ethical or moral pillar of equality is good? And then, so the whole point is I want him to admit that he may agree partially with equality as a moral concept, but that he doesn't support communism because it doesn't work. So then basically what I want him to get him to admit is that even if an ideology has moral weight behind it, if it doesn't work in reality, it's not worth pursuing. That's why he doesn't support communism.
Well, he's going to counter back and say that communism is the politics of envy and it doesn't have any moral weight behind it. So I think that would fly by him a little bit.
Well, but the moral argument for communism is equality. Now, it comes at the expense of freedom. You have to take people's freedom away in order to make everyone equal. But that's the moral justification for communism is equality. As someone who's center left, he does believe in equality, not obviously to the degree of communism. He probably believes in like, equality of opportunity, equality before the law. He believes in some kind of trade-off between freedom and equality, because total freedom is anarchy, total equality is communism. So, hey.
Well,
hey, okay, look,
Sparky said he can make the counter argument, so I'm going to let him do it.
Yeah, man. Look, I can hit this real quick and easy. Okay.
All right. Okay.
The problem with communism is the fact, in theory, it is based on a utopian society that does not include what actual human beings will do. Okay.
Well, that's a practical argument.
Yeah,
I'm
he's talking
from
about
a moral
standpoint.
And from a moral standpoint, because it believes in equality. If you believe in equality, you may think it goes too far, but you agree with the moral justification of communism as it pertains to equality. You just disagree with communism as an ideology because in practicality it never works, and it ends with people dying. It ends with society collapsing and mass starvation and mass graves.
Yeah, it's got the best bread lines and everything yet.
Right. So what I want him to say, the thing I'm trying to accomplish with this line of reasoning, is I want him to admit that if an ideology doesn't work in reality, it doesn't matter what the moral justification is. It could be. It could have a fantastic moral and ethical justification behind it, but if it doesn't work in reality, it's shit. And it should not be practiced. It shouldn't be supported. It should be outright abandoned. It has to work in reality first before you can implement it and support it.
Well, first of all, I don't really see Sargon ever throwing the moral justification.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
I
I have, but here's the reason why
I just don't see him messing with that, because really that's a non sequitur. Because if you look at the morality of it, yeah, going by traditional modern standards, the idealism that exists around communism is about as close to a utopian society that you're going to get. Where the problem actually lies is that people themselves are not moral.
Right. Well, here's the reason why I think it's important that I get him to admit that an ideology that doesn't work in reality, it doesn't matter what the moral justification is. It doesn't matter that it sounds good or it's the right thing to do. All that matters is, does it work? Because he's an egalitarian. Every argument against communism is identical to the argument against egalitarianism. Egalitarianism doesn't work.
Yeah,
well, egalitarianism isn't about everyone being equal as much as everyone has the opportunity to be equal. It is on their own merits that they get there.
Egalitarianism goes a little bit further.
Yeah, it gives people equal rights, undeserved rights that they never earned. It grants people an equal legal status, and that's where it goes. It's not just equal opportunity. Everyone has an opportunity to whatever. Egalitarianism is equal rights. That's the key. And the other thing is you have to understand that there's these concepts called negative rights and positive rights. And this used to be called rights and privileges. Rights have become negative rights and privileges have become positive rights. But they're all bundled up in this modern definition of egalitarianism. And like, for example, Sargon, he believes in national health care. He believes in social safety nets. Now, my point is, just like the way communism doesn't work, because you eventually run out of other people's money and everybody starves, egalitarianism doesn't work because you eventually run out of babies and everybody prays to Mecca. So
Dude,
just
you
like
actually just went way further than I thought you were going to go with that.
Yeah,
part of the reason, when it comes to things like that, it's like how do you squander a large? Or, I mean, how do you end up with a small fortune? You start out with a large fortune, and most of these, Western European and Scandinavian countries that have insane benefits and social safety nets, most of them were incredibly wealthy well before they started doing it.
Well, they were wealthy. It's not about the wealth. What happened is usually capitalism in the post-war era, because Scandinavia was largely spared from World War II. That's where they got their wealth. They helped rebuild the rest of Europe, and they got extremely rich from it. But then they immediately became socialist, and now they're just piddling away their wealth. So, I mean, it's not sustainable. If you get a big boom after a war, and then you slowly piddle it away, that's not a sustainable model.
Yeah,
like when you give women rights, when you give them equal rights to men, they stop having kids. This isn't theory. This is fact. This is proven all around the world. In fact, even in countries that have a sustainable birth rate, the sustainable birth rate is coming from the minority, where basically the subculture is very patriarchal. Like, for example, in Israel, it's the Orthodox Jews who reject modernity and actually embrace patriarchy, who are having all the kids in Israel. They're the ones pushing the Israeli birth rate above 3. Without those Orthodox Jews, the birth rates in Israel would be no better than those in Europe. And if you look at Sweden and France, only the immigrants are having kids because they're Muslim. And Islam, I don't know if you got the memo, they don't treat their women that well. So there's a correlation between women's rights and low fertility. And there's also correlation between taking away those rights or not letting women enjoy those rights and high fertility. And just like the way communism always fails because you run out of money, egalitarianism always fails because you stop reproducing at a sustainable level.
Well, and you run out of people to pay for it.
Right, and the other problem.
The same end.
Right, and the other problem with egalitarianism and modernity is once you give women rights, they demand welfare states because a woman's biological prerogative is for security and to be provided for. That's what she looks for in a mate. So when the government offers her a guaranteed alternative, like, if you can't find the man to support you and protect you, the government will support you and protect you. So of course, once you give a woman the vote, and this is proven, they've done studies, the welfare state blows up. It's either established or just triples in size or even worse. So as soon as you give women equal rights, they create the welfare state. Well, the welfare state relies on more people paying into the system than are benefiting from the system. It's effectively a pyramid or Ponzi scheme by design. So you can't have a shrinking population and a welfare state. You just can't. You will run out of money and your aging population will die. So what every country does, in fact, even Japan is doing this. They are opening up, they're starting to let people immigrate and work in Japan because they simply have a labor shortage. There aren't enough workers in Japan to work in the country and do the necessary jobs and to pay taxes to support the aging population. And this is Japan. This is the big ethno state. But throughout most of European countries, they just fling open their gates to open immigration. And the only countries, like people talk about, well, why don't we bring in, white people from Eastern Europe or South Africa or Australia or New Zealand? Well, none of them are having above sustainable replacement fertility. None of them. So at best, what you're going to do is you're going to consolidate all white people into, let's say, Western Europe. And then in 100 years, they're just going to go extinct. Because you can't have a society with a below replacement fertility. It's impossible. And if you look at And the reason why we import immigrants from Africa and the Middle East is because they're patriarchal. They're having excess children. There is a direct causal link between a patriarchal society and high fertility and an egalitarian or feminist society and low fertility. And when you have a welfare state, you must import people, and the only people who have excess people to export are patriarchal countries with completely different, incompatible cultures. And what is actually happening is, in like Sweden, for example, the feminist government, run by feminists, these are the same feminists that will throw a man in jail for having consensual sex because she withdrew consent the next day. That Swedish feminist will defend Islam as a religion of feminism and call anyone who speaks out against like the rapes and everything as a racist. So they're destroying their own men and their own society while throwing open the gates and defending Islam, which is going to take their rights away. Anyway. So it's a self-correcting problem in the long run, but it shows just as communism doesn't work, egalitarianism doesn't work for the same reasons.
It's self-correcting in that eventually you run out of money, so you have to just stop.
Right. Well, it's worse because at least in communism, when you run out of money and the starving begins, you don't have an alien population raping and killing you.
That's true. But another thing about what you're saying, I'm not even. It's hard to even convince me that we're importing all these people just to, fill labor demands and have high birth rate, because most of these people that are coming in, they're not taxpayers; they are tax consumers.
That's true, but that's
the problem that they're having in Europe right now is the fact that they're finding out that the individuals that they imported in aren't paying any fucking taxes, so they're not really helping to pay for this massive social.
Well, but the thing is
they are paying them to go home.
But the problem is they had no alternative. It's like a cancer treatment. If Europe does nothing, they will 100% go bankrupt because they don't have enough babies, they don't have enough workers, they will go bankrupt. If they import immigrants from the Middle East and Africa, there's a 98% chance that they go bankrupt anyway because most of them are illiterate and everything like that. But there's that small chance that they might, pull their head out of their ass and actually be worth a shit. So because it's basically they have a guaranteed chance of failure over here and they have a small sliver of chance of success, they're going to go with that. And again, only patriarchal countries in the Middle East and Africa are having enough children to export them. If you I'll use a Japan. It's let's say the United States, because we don't want any more immigrants from Latin America or Africa or the Middle East. We want highly educated, Western trained people. So we're going to have open immigration for Japanese. If you're Japanese, you can come to America. We welcome you. Welcome Japanese people. Japan has basically, they need their people for their own country. They can't afford to export them to America. And it's the same story basically throughout the Western world. None of the countries are reproducing, so none of the countries can afford to export their people. So all that's going to happen is you're going to get the people at the bottom rungs of that society. So you may get people from Japan or Eastern Europe, but they're not going to be the ones you want. They're going to be the pieces of shit that are going to run and try and look for a better life in America. So it's not really an ideal solution. So there is no solution other than.
Do you want a Sargon guy? Because I got a Sargon guy right up here waiting.
Okay, sure.
I'm sorry, man. You said you wanted the Sargon guy. I figured I'd bring one over if you wanted one.
Well, I want to bounce this argument off of him and kind of hear what his response is, if he has questions or if he has a counter argument. I'm not trying to start shit. I literally just want to try out.
I want you to have a chance to try out your arguments on a guy who's kind of like Sargon. You know what I mean? Because I know this dude here. He's from California. He's remotely leftist. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
He's a good dude. You know
talking about me?
This dude SINRISE. He's cool. Yeah, you're talking about you're a cool guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right?
Remotely leftist. That's not something I've heard before.
You're remotely leftist.
Would you call yourself
center left?
Yeah, center left, egalitarian.
I call myself center right at this point, but I've moved over there fairly recently.
Okay.
So I guess I speak both languages.
Okay. Do you like Sargon of Akkad? Do you kind of find his arguments are similar to your own?
Yeah, a lot of stuff. I don't agree with everything, but I think he does a pretty goddamn good job.
Okay. So let me back up and kind of give you the The reason why I'm here. So someone mentioned to me in a live stream with him the other day about debating about egalitarianism. He's not going to talk to me. So, but I have an argument. I was going to make a video kind of like talking to him, since, we're not going to ever do a live stream together. But I didn't want to just kind of monologue. So I wanted to find someone who I could bounce this argument off of, who had similar beliefs. So if you had questions or counter arguments, I would hear them and be able to respond to them.
That makes sense. I'd say, unless there's somebody else who could speak, to that, I guess I'm probably as close as you're going to get to somebody who's thinks like him. I suppose I would not consider myself anywhere near as smart as him.
Well, no, that you don't have to be like well read. Basically, what I'm going to do, my argument is based on the logic of egalitarianism.
Yeah,
so
I'm definitely up for the challenge.
All right. So my first thing is, I know Sargon doesn't believe in communism. Do you believe in communism?
No way. No.
All right. Now, I know it doesn't work. We all agreed communism doesn't work, but from a moral standpoint or an ethical standpoint, because communism espouses the moral virtue of equality. Now, it does come at the extreme expense of freedom, but being someone kind of someone in the middle, center right or center left, you must agree that some amount of equality is good, even if it comes at the expense of freedom. Maybe we differ on that, where that line should be drawn. Like I know Sargon believes in social welfare programs, like helping the poor and the elderly and so forth, and other people might be like, no, fuck those people. But my point is, from a moral standpoint. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I don't maybe I kind of want to interject, though. I'm not so sure that he's necessarily in favor of just government-provided welfare. I think it's more along the lines of, like, it's a good idea to take care of our sick and elderly people. And I mean, I think maybe the arguments would be like, what's the best way to do that? And I don't think he would come down hard on the side of government has to do it. You know what I'm saying? I could be wrong, but that's kind of the sense that I get.
Well, that's a practical argument. The reason why I think this is important is because from a basically communism, sticking to communism, for example, it may sound like the right thing to do. Equality is good.
Yeah, I think I know where you're going.
Right, but it doesn't work. And it leads to people dying. It leads to mass starvation. It leads to tens of millions of deaths. So even though it's built on what could be argued a moral foundation, because it's so incompatible with reality, only a fucking retard would espouse that ideology openly and actually seek to implement it, because it's suicidal, even though it seems like the good thing, the right thing to do. So I
think I know where you're going with this, and you're right. It does, and that's why so many people latch onto the idea, because it sounds like the moral thing to do. And I think
what he's getting at is you get the same results, you just get it slower with this center left egalitarian mindset.
Yeah, I made a thing called I call it the political loop.
Oh, that's interesting.
Where so you have equality and freedom, and you have basically on the equality side, you have arguments for morals and ethics. It's the right thing to do, and then from the practicality, you have this is what works best.
Right. It's almost like the philosophy is like, it's the right thing to do. So just by having your heart in the right place, things are going to work out, kind of attitude.
Right. So when you're arguing, like if you talk to someone who believes in communism and you try to say that it doesn't work and people die, they don't care, because to them, it's the right thing to do. And if it doesn't work and people die, then something went wrong in the implementation.
It was not real communism.
It wasn't real. That's what they mean, because their beliefs that it's the right thing to do morally and ethically is steadfast. So if it didn't happen the way it should have happened, then something must have happened that has nothing to do with the ideology itself. But anyway, my point is, what I want someone like you or Sargon to basically kind of come to the conclusion of is, even if an ideology is based on something noble and something good like equality, if it doesn't work in reality, you should not support it. It has to work in reality. It has to be sustainable. And communism isn't sustainable. Everyone loves it until the money runs out and everyone starts starving. So anyway, so now we're going to switch gears and talk about egalitarianism, and I'm going to present the case that, like communism, egalitarianism sounds good. It seems like the right thing to do, but it doesn't work, and it's incompatible with a sustainable society.
Yeah, I heard you guys talking a bit ago about the distinction between egalitarianism just trying to define egalitarianism, and I think you might have lost me there, because I've always understood it as just kind of the idea of equality of opportunity.
Yeah, but once you get into what that means, it basically means equal rights, equal opportunities. But the problem is what does that look like in reality? Right. Again, we have to move from just like communism. If I say I just believe in equality. Yeah, but you want to take everyone's private property away, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's how we get equality. So we have to move from the concept of, okay, treating everyone equally, equal opportunity, equal rights. Okay, what does that mean? In reality, what equal rights means is you treat people who have different levels of authority and responsibility with the same rights. And if somebody's more responsible than someone else, or someone's responsible for someone else, they can't have the same freedom. But then you can't take their rights away because everyone has to have equal rights. I'll give you an example. I know I'm showing you, once you get into the weeds and you start implementing it doesn't work.
I'm guessing you're referring to positive rights.
Oh, yes. Negative. Okay, there's negative rights and positive rights. Negative rights are basically rights you have that people can't do things to you, like people can't kill you, enslave you. Those are negative rights. Positive right is things people must do for you, like provide you with education and healthcare. So, for example, healthcare is a good example.
I reject that definition of rights. I just wanted to make sure that
I reject that. I reject that too. The problem is language has been so corrupted, especially around because elections are won and lost in the center. The far left and the far right, they're already locked in. Who wins the election is all based on the center. So that's where all the squishy language comes in.
Questions.
Yeah, so I'll try to define. I'll use an example to show what I'm talking about. So let's say you believe that the government should provide health care for everyone, or like people who work hard and who get injured shouldn't become bankrupt just because they didn't have insurance. So you support a national single payer healthcare system. Now, you are now making the taxpayer responsible for your healthcare. Now, and because other people are now financially responsible for your healthcare, you may not have realized this, but now that they're responsible for your healthcare, they now have a say in your health. So if you get morbidly obese, taxpayers are going to have an opinion about allowing you to become morbidly obese because they're the ones paying your healthcare bills. If you want to drive a motorcycle without a helmet, you'd be like, well, it's my body. Like, yeah, that is your body, but when you get injured, I have to pay your healthcare. I have to pay your disability. So because I'm financially on the hook for your choices, I'm going to pass a law restricting your choices. So my point is, when you give other people responsibility over you, they have to take your freedom away. Because if you don't, like, imagine if you had a law where you're like, you're responsible for me and I could do anything I want, that would be chaos, and those people would get super pissed because you'd be doing whatever you want, and people be coming after them and taking their money to pay for your shit, and they had no power to stop you. They would get super mad, and they probably, if that didn't stop, they'd probably be an armed revolt. Yeah. So you have to have authority and freedom linked. Now, when you have egalitarianism and you give everyone equal rights, you have a very similar situation to the person who wants to, be fat, but then have someone else take care of their health care. Because in society, you have groups of people who are dependent on others, children, women, so on and so forth. And men and people, and not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a sex thing, just individuals. There are people who have responsibility for other people, and when you give them equal rights, they lose their authority over that which they are responsible for. They no longer have the ability, just like taxpayers have this authority to tell you how to live your life. Imagine if taxpayers didn't have the authority to tell you how to live your life. You can just get fat and kill yourself on a motorcycle, and then taxpayers had to pay the bill. They get pissed off. In that same way, when you give everyone equal rights, the people who are responsible for these people who shouldn't have these rights, you've now given them equal rights, and now they've lost their authority over those people, and now they have no ability to stop them from fucking things up, but they're still responsible for them.
Yeah, I mean,
And
what
so
you're describing in libertarian literature is the moral hazard of having such policy.
Yeah, and I think you're arguing against a kind of an argument that comes from basically not really understanding the difference between rights and privileges.
No. He knows the difference.
Establish that. I'm not saying you don't know the difference. I'm saying the people you argue against, the people who are putting these arguments out that you're arguing against, don't understand the difference. They conflate the two often, and I think that's kind of where the crux of the disagreement comes.
Well, let me ask you a question. Is voting a right or a privilege?
It's absolutely a privilege.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say it's a privilege.
But by definition, it's a privilege, right?
Yeah, it kind of is. I mean, there's things that have to happen before you're able to vote, and whereas a right is something that it's just there by default. So I would say
natural law comes into play, right? There's a philosophical framework that justifies it universally. You can't universally bestow the right to vote.
But you could define voting as a right of a citizen or of a law-abiding citizen. Maybe.
Yeah. You're going to use the same language, but we know these are two different things.
The problem here's the problem.
If you want to get absolutely, clear about everything.
Right. So let me ask you a question. If I said, all right, so rights include the right to life, liberty, property, so on and so forth, but things like voting, health care, so on, these are privileges, not rights. So I believe in equal rights, but I don't believe in equal privileges. So
and that's what I'm saying is I think that's where this conversation centers around.
But hold on. Now, if I said I don't think women should vote, am I an egalitarian?
Well, I guess
I'm just taking their privileges away. I still believe in equal rights, but is that an egalitarian position that women shouldn't vote?
I don't know. I just feel if there's an authority over the women, right? Like if I can't vote for the government, then I should also be able to withdraw.
Not an authority, responsibility.
In the strictest sense, you're right. It wouldn't be taking away someone's rights.
But the egalitarian position is men and women are equal. I'll tell this is the reality. So theoretically, we could tiptoe around everything, but in reality, egalitarians believe men and women are equal and they should be treated as equal, even if men are responsible for them, and even if men have lost all their authority over them. That's okay because men and women are equal, and egalitarianism and equal rights and all that. And it doesn't work.
It shouldn't matter. Like the qualification is the qualification for something maybe a little bit easier to look at is like the military, for example. I'm all for women being in the military as long as they can pass the exact same qualifications as a man. If you could do the job, what difference does it make, about anything else about you? You can do the job or you can't.
Well, okay. So
I guess you could look at voting the same way. If you're a man or a woman, if you can pass the test or whatever it is.
All right. So I'm gonna lay some truth bombs on you. So I want you to imagine a world. Do you? Oh my goodness.
I have a feeling, but go ahead.
So I want you to imagine a world where there were no double standards.
Right.
We had a meritocracy. Women had to compete against men on the same playing field. They weren't given any preferential treatment. They weren't doing everything, right? So now, studies have been done, even in co-ed militaries like Israel and Canada. Only 4% of women can meet the minimum male standard. So 96% of women can't even meet the minimum male standard. Only 4% can meet the minimum male standard. In a meritocracy, 96% of basically everyone with anything worth anything are going to be men. And only 4% can meet the minimum male standard. So you're going to have 4% kind of sloshing around at the bottom rungs, but everyone else is going to be a man, especially in the upper rungs. Now they didn't cheat; they competed, and it was fair. And just that men have biological advantages over women. So now, since men have this, and I could go in about the just societally, men they fight all the wars. They are not they're the ones who have to go to the draft. So in a world of a meritocracy without double standards, women would not vote, just period.
Well, a few of them might.
Yeah, a few of them. We're talking a very small. Yeah, very few women would vote. Like so few women that it would be an insignificant. It would be less significant than trying to get the gay vote.
Right.
That's how insignificant the female vote would be. Instead of being the majority of voters, they would be like, it'd be like trying to get the midget left-handed lesbian vote.
Well, some of this is democracy being the god that failed. As soon as you get a critical mass of people who believe in these kind of rights that we're talking about, it doesn't really matter if it's men or women.
Well, my argument is it's not. See, I
know women are much more likely to want to be, because of their, just the nature of women, the maternal instinct. They're more likely to promote welfare programs, but.
Well, yeah, but then my point is that the egalitarian standard is that people are equal and should be treated as equal and have equal rights. But once you get into it, just like communism is just everybody should be the same and everyone should be treated equally. But then once you get into how do you do that, it involves a lot of seizure and gulags and mass graves and starvation, and it's not good. Egalitarianism in practice involves double standards, destroying of meritocracy, destroying of democracy. And also the big thing I want to talk about is the destruction of the fertility rate, because when you do not have an egalitarian society where men basically have authority over women and families, you have a high fertility rate. When you start giving women rights, the fertility rate shits the bed. And it shits the bed everywhere and every time. Even in Muslim countries, like Iran Iran allows women to go to school. Their fertility rate is basically on par with Europe.
Well, the fertility rate itself isn't necessarily...
Absent a welfare state, the fertility rate, I don't think it would be important.
Not necessarily.
The fertility rate becomes a problem itself,
Well, even if... Now... The fertility, the welfare state necessitates immigration, but let's say you got rid of the welfare state, you no longer need immigrants.
I've never heard before. The welfare state necessitates immigration.
If you do not have if you don't have the native population reproducing, with a growing population, the welfare state requires more people paying into the system than taking out.
Yeah.
So if the native population isn't reproducing, and I have papers from the UN or the European Union talking about this, because the they actually talked about it in 2003. Because the European native population is not reproducing at a sustainable level, they basically said we have to import Muslims. We have to, because otherwise our economies are going to crash. And that's because of the massive welfare states they have. So if your native population isn't reproducing, which they don't when women have all these rights, and in fact there have been studies done where if women don't have the rights, like people say, it's just a part of being in a rich country, and that's not true. As long as women don't have rights, the country could be as rich, it could be as educated, doesn't matter. But once you give women rights, that's when the fertility rate shits the bed. Women are the gatekeepers for reproduction. So my big reveal, my big fucking playing the cards face up is communism is based on it's based on a moral foundation of equality, but it does not work in reality. Egalitarianism is based again on it sounds like the right thing to do, just like communism, just like equality is the right thing to do, but it doesn't work. Egalitarianism is based on the same notion of equality. And just like communism, it sounds like the right thing to do, but when you implement it, everything goes to shit. And it's even worse than communism, because at least when, like Venezuela right now, look at all the starvation and the gangs and all that shit, it's horrible. But at least Venezuela isn't teeming with people from completely alien cultures who are about to basically permanently replace the Venezuelan population and stamp it out of existence forever.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to make sure I'm clear when you say it's better because they don't have not importing a whole bunch of Muslims, right? So you're saying at the end of communism, when it's over, the Venezuelan people will be left to themselves to rebuild instead of...
Yeah, the people will still die. But the native people of Venezuela will still be the native people of Venezuela. At the end of Europe, when Europe dies, Europe will never rise again. Europe will be dead forever, and it will become the Middle East.
Well, yeah, it's going to get replaced with pockets of Islamic countries if there was some catastrophic economic collapse.
and that's my so actually like communism is less destructive because at least it doesn't cause entire societies to go permanently extinct. It causes a lot of death and economic collapse, but egalitarianism, and it's solely due to the fertility rate. Yeah. If egalitarianism simply caused economic collapse, it would be no better than communism or no worse than communism. But because it also destroys the fertility while necessitating immigration, and the thing about fertility rates, they're directly tied to women's rights. So the only countries which have excess populations to export to Europe are patriarchal countries like from Africa, the Middle East. So they have a completely alien patriarchal culture. They're being imported into Europe and they're taking over. And what's hilarious is the feminists who created these problems are championing their own society's demise by calling anyone who speaks out against it as a racist, by covering up for the gangs that are raping and killing people, by declaring Islam a feminist religion, while at the same time crushing their own men under more and more laws which take away their authority and freedom. And it's almost comical how self-correcting feminism is, because as soon as feminism wins, basically the seeds of their own destruction are sown, and then they just get replaced by another patriarchy.
Yeah. You make some pretty interesting points.
Themselves from the inside,
and you've made some connections that that make a lot of sense to me. I have a hard time really arguing much of anything that you're saying.
I am curious about one thing, Monkey. I was talking about, absent of a welfare state, I wouldn't think fertility rates would really matter. And you said, well, that's not really true. This is if we lived in Kapistan, right? Like, why would it matter?
Well, we don't need any. We can look at Japan. So Japan, they're not importing a bunch of immigrants, but they still they're importing workers for now because they have a labor shortage. Now, they're not giving these workers citizenship or whatever, but you have to understand that the rural areas of Japan are being depopulated. They can't even give homes away in these rural areas because nobody wants to live there because everybody's moving to the city. So the population of Japan is slowly concentrating as the population decreases. And then now they're going to bring in workers from other countries to bring up this labor shortage, even if they don't give them citizenship.
Japan also has a very shaky economic history itself. Its government's gotten itself into a lot of fucking trouble.
Japan's got a lot of problems right now.
Negative interest rates, that was a brilliant goddamn idea.
Negative population growth is a pretty big problem too.
Well, okay, wait. I don't think negative population growth is a motherfucking problem in any way, shape. No, it's not.
It is when they're looking at
a second. Hang on, let me make my point real quick before.
Essentially.
I know, but let me make my point. Here's the thing, right? As of 1900, there was only like 1.8 billion people on planet Earth, and right now we're at like 7.5 and fucking counting. You know what I mean? Yeah. And you don't have that precipitous.
So how many of them are Japan?
Well, hold on. Let me explain. I've had this exact same argument. So let me just. I know what you're going to say. So yes, when you're talking about the population worldwide being very low, that's fine because there was still parity. So when there's a plague or something like the Mongols go around murdering everyone, as long as it affects everyone more or less equally, that's fine. So if there's the Black Plague comes through and a third of the human population is wiped out, but because it affects everyone, the status quo is more or less maintained. Yeah, a lot of people are dead, but everything's fine. The survivors will rebuild and the status quo is maintained. However, when you have a situation where one group of people are declining in population and another group of people are growing in population, that is not going to end. That's going to end with the shrinking population getting steamrolled and wiped out.
Well, I don't know. I really think that's. I really don't think that's absolutely true. I mean, because you have countries like Libya was on the decline, Iran's on the decline. You have countries. China's on the decline, Japan's on the decline, South Korea's on the decline, and Western Europe's on the decline. America's on the decline. Canada's on the decline. A lot of South America is on the decline. So I really don't see it as it is going to be a worldwide decline. I mean, granted, you still have Africa having a whole bunch of kids, but ultimately, they're dealing with massive plagues from HIV and things of this nature. So no and yes. They have a life expectancy of 47, which me and Excel argue about all the damn time. Which the reality is that you only have two out of the 5 kids that they have are actually living. You know what I'm saying? As far as past.
Okay. So
So I'm
Right,
curious.
I'm-
what do you
I'm-
think,
I'm not saying-
Monkey, what
I'm
do
not
you think
saying
that Sargon would argue with you on any of these points. That's what I'm wondering about.
What I anticipate is he would argue from principle when it comes to egalitarianism, but then when I brought up communism, he'd try to switch it to the practical argument.
I see.
And the key is you have to pick one. If we're going to argue morals and ethics, then you have to agree that communism is just as moral and ethical as egalitarianism. If we're going to argue practicality, then you have to argue that egalitarianism fails in the same way that communism fails.
Yeah,
so you can't have it both ways.
That's where he's going to
unfortunate
disagree
is
with
that I
you,
think
and
if you could
I have an idea
actually
of what he
get-
would say.
I think if you could actually get him in a debate though, and get him to listen to your points, I think he might actually, at least consider. He's pretty good that way, and I think that.
Are you familiar with Are you familiar with the academic agent, Turfling Monkey?
The academic agent? No.
Yeah, no, he's another British guy, but he's from the classical liberal variety. And he rails against people like Sargon and V all the time for the socialism light policies.
Right.
Saying some of the same things that you're saying. It's that they're not sustainable in the long run. And what they try to say is, well, capitalism is productive enough that we can shave some of that off to fund these welfare programs, not understanding the slow creep of socialism.
Well, here's the thing: you can have welfare programs, but you have to have welfare programs don't negative. In fact, welfare programs can benefit fertility. I'm not arguing for the abolition of welfare programs, although I do.
I am.
I do think that would be better. I do think the world would be better without welfare programs. However, if I'm talking about a sustainable fertility rate, so that societies don't get replaced.
Yeah, but you're also talking about taking women's rights away, and while it could make all the sense in the world, having that argument is essentially impossible.
Yeah, that's not.
Absolutely. It's
absolutely
not.
Where someone like Sargon is far more motivated to not talk about stuff like that, even if he might agree with you. If he was to say that, it would not be helpful for him. So he's got to. I agree. Things like that too.
No, I agree, but
that may be unfortunate that we can't really have the full conversations that we want to have all the time. But the reality is that there's not a lot of people are even going to be open to that idea. Much less entertain a debate.
Let me drop again. I got some more truth bombs I'm going to drop for.
I love your truth bombs. I'm just saying that.
I know. Well, hold on. I'll for truth bomb number 1, it's inevitable. Not only will it happen, it's guaranteed to happen, because there is no other
collapse.
Women will lose their rights. They will either lose their rights because their own men take them, they will lose their rights because Muslim men take them, or they will lose their rights because everybody loses their rights. Okay, Muslim women will take them in the same way they've taken their own women's rights. Muslim women who live in Western European countries like the UK, there's an article that came out where Muslim women are pleading in Sharia courts for the imam to grant them divorce because their husband is beating them. So, first of all, why are there Sharia courts in the UK, for one? But the second thing is the government is basically acquiescing to these Sharia courts, which basically override British law. So, here's how the Muslims take women's rights away. It's exactly what they've done with the Sharia courts in the UK. No votes were cast. Nobody had a referendum on taking women's rights away. The Muslim men simply took women's rights away, and then they created their own parallel system of justice in the Sharia courts. And because there's so many of them, the government just backed down. So Muslim women effectively do not have the rights of British women. That is a fact, and that's within Britain. British Muslim women do not have the rights of white native British women. And when Islam is the law of the land, because they're the majority, they will extend that to all women. That's how women lose their rights.
Right. I just, real quick for the Sharia thing, the way I understand it with the Sharia courts is that it's not technically legally binding by British law, but they just won't interfere with whatever punishment the Sharia courts come up with.
But that's the same thing.
Yeah, I know. It's so fucked up how they're trying to get around it. That's what I'm talking.
The other thing is that the whole Sharia law thing, that's hard for me to even swallow, because I'm an atheist and I'm a recovering Christian. I've been down that road, and I am you know, if you're going to start arguing for theocracies or you know, authoritarianism, that's
I'm not.
You know, so
see, people make this mistake thinking that taking women's rights away is some kind of fascist dictatorship thing.
That's not what I'm saying either. That's not necessarily what I'm thinking. I'm just saying like that's, you know, I'm sorry, but Islam is not. It's not interested in those things. You know what I'm saying? It's a recipe for conquest. It's a recipe for an empire. It's
the reason why
build a great society. Okay?
But I use that example, that modern example that's happening right now that I can point to demonstrate that when people tell me women will never have their rights taken away, it'll never happen, no politician will ever vote to this, the Constitution will never be amended, the 19th Amendment will never be repealed. I agree. That doesn't matter. The Muslims have already taken women's rights away without any of those things happening. So men can also take all men can take their women's rights away. It doesn't require any laws to be changed. It doesn't require any politicians to be on. You don't need to reform the law to take women's rights away because women are dependent on men. And so like you go to these no-go zones, the women, these Muslim women or just women living in these no-go zones, yes, the feminist laws are like this, like in Sweden. Sweden has a feminist government. If a woman picks up the phone, she absolutely can call the cops and the laws and everything. All these feminist laws will be there for her. But if she lives in a no-go zone, nobody's coming to help her. The cops are not coming to enforce the feminist laws because they don't want to go into no-go zones.
The cops to come there.
Right. So, but again, no laws were reformed, no politicians. So everyone is like, oh, that'll never happen. It's impossible. It's already happened. Now, I'm not arguing that we need to convert to Islam, but I'm saying the argument that it's impossible, it will never happen it's been disproven today because it's happening now.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
So it doesn't. You don't need to convert to Islam to do this. All men. In fact, there's a group. You may not be aware of this. There's a group in northern India called Nagaland. It's a province of northern India. And it's actually populated by this Christian group. They're not Hindu. They're Christians, but they're descended from like these headhunters, and they were like a badass warrior culture. And they're basically the citizens of Nagaland, and they're super patriarchal, but they're Christian, so they're not Muslim. This isn't a religious thing, but I'm just using this as an example. They have the same attitude as like the Muslims. Basically, Nagaland is a no-go zone for the government. There was a story that came out in the news last year about this woman in Nagaland who's complaining that the government wasn't enforcing her rights. They sent police and government officials to enforce the law in Nagaland, and they set the cars on fire and burned the building down. And then the government officials fled, and then the government just backed down because it's an entire province. They don't want to go to war against Nagaland. So the point is if men want to, they can take their women's rights away today. There's not a goddamn thing anyone can do about it. Because at the end of the day, so it's not impossible, and you don't have to convert to Islam. But if you don't do that, the population will continue to decline. Patriarchal societies such as Islam will continue to grow. They will overtake you, and then they will force you to convert or kill you.
I don't know. So one of the problems I have with that is there's a cultural shift that would have to take place for that to happen in the West. Well, if you import a bunch of Muslims, there's no cultural shift necessary because that's already part of their culture.
No, all it takes is enough people going through this fucking college system. But I'm gonna tell you what, fellas. Hey, look, I got to go to work, fellas.
Okay, man.
You know what I mean? I got to go to work, so I'm gonna have to put a hard stop on this at the moment. I fucking apologize.
Okay.
TFM, Thursday night at 10:00, we do another stream. If you're interested. You know, I mean, you can come through and we can fucking keep going at this. Like, I'm fucking down. I love this conversation.
We can start early if SINRISE wants to debate you on this, but unfortunately, I don't think I have anybody debate you on this shit, man.
You're gonna have a hard time finding. I mean, there's more to talk about for sure, but I've got more to say about the subject.
I was just testing out my ideas, but
you know what, I think your ideas are really on the right track. I think the useful conversation is how do we make these ideas palatable.
I want to point before we go, I want to make one last point. People who say that's not part of our culture, women didn't vote until 1920. America's been around since the 1700s.
That's something I wanted to talk about.
Women voting is not just bred into our culture forever and ever. It's within living memory, and since it's happened, the country's gone to absolute shit. So we can undo these mistakes. We don't have to just accept that America didn't start in 1920, it started in 1776, and women did not vote.
Yeah.
It's the 19th Amendment,
And it
not the First Amendment.
wasn't because they were oppressed either. That's what the one myth is.
Right.
That women
In
didn't
fact,
vote
it
because
was
men didn't let them and didn't want them to. And all women have always wanted to vote so badly. No, that's not actually the case. And a lot of women, in fact, most women fought against it. Because the
I don't
consequence
want to say
of being
most.
able to vote were meant you had to fucking serve
Women were afraid of going to the draft. That's why they didn't want to vote. Right. Okay.
Yo, I gotta go.
There's
Go.
something to that.
Hold on.
Hey,
I gotta
We gotta go.
Yeah.
All right.
See you later. By the way, I'm gonna go check out Jagan Pole stream. I'm gonna drop the link in the chat. Anybody that wants to go,
anybody wants to go check out Jagan shit. He's a good dude. He's a good fucking guy.
Jake Paul, the guy with the suicide forest prank.
No, Jagan political.
Oh, some of that fucking retard, that surfer boy who like makes those prank videos.
No, definitely not him.
I was like, what the fuck?
Jagan political. Man. Cool
Okay.
You know what I mean?
All
right, man. It's appreciated. Thank you very much for coming through TFM SINRISE. Thank you very much for fucking trying to hold down the leftist side. I know you're from Cali and shit. You know what I mean? That's the only reason, you know what I mean? I was like, yo, SINRISE, you're a Californian.
You can hold leftist.
Yo, this is Tom Pease with Pnoid News. As always, with my bottom bitch motherfucking accelerate. Thank you everybody for coming out. Make sure you hit that sub button on the way out the motherfucking door. Thank you very much. Peace be like